Shalom, family. Yes, we're live. Yes, we're live. I was waiting for a few people to come in, and it's not going to be that many people. I already know we're like past 1 a.m. So, y'all, the dollar, you can say is gone. You know, Donald Trump, over these last few days, put a lawsuit on Jerome Powell. Donald Trump wants to take over the Federal Reserve and get Jerome Powell out of the way. I should have known that that was going to disrupt the dollar, and it did. But even prior to that, there's been a lot of things indicating that this dollar was weak. And, this is going to be very difficult for a lot of people. Prices are gonna skyrocket. You think they're high now, it's about to get far worse. And see, the only thing that's gotta happen now is the US dollar is no longer the global currency, and that is about to change. That is about to change. It's gonna be a rough year on Americans. Unfortunately, you don't have a good, viable leadership in this country. Donald Trump is the biggest idiot you could have in charge right now. This man, okay, don't believe a man that's got to have 2 MRIs is going to get us all out of this. He won't. Now it makes sense on why he so desperately grabbed up Venezuela, grabbing up Greenland and anything he can grab, because the Trump administration already knew this dollar was gone. They already did. Now his actions make sense. He think if he gets all of these different countries, then it'll make it easier for everything to rebound. But this dollar is not going to rebound, y'all. It's not going to rebound. I think that we have to look at it realistically, because all this government's going to do is lie to us, y'all. But they are admitting, a lot of the economists are saying that the dollar may never come back. Many of them are saying if it does, we could be in this situation for years and years. And I don't believe we're going to be sitting here for years and years, waiting for these folks that's been in charge for hundreds of years to resolve this thing. They are not going to resolve this, y'all. If they were smart enough to do something, we would have seen it by now. It's been centuries, and we're still waiting to see this high IQ that they keep talking about, you know. But you know how it is. They want all of the accolades and none of the blame. And that's exactly what we're seeing. And it just goes to show you they can't even be honest with the American people about the dollar. And you can't expect them to be honest about anything else. They're just going to try their best to keep us in the dark. And then Donald Trump sitting here talking about we need Greenland. It's national security. No, it isn't. It's because you effed up so bad that you are looking for other sources out here to latch on to. You've messed up. See, when he messed up? 2 times last year. One was putting out global tariffs. When he put those global tariffs out, everything in the economy skyrocketed. You notice nothing, the gas has gone down, but that's only temporary. As soon as spring and summer come, the gas is going to be skyrocketing. It is a temporary bump. That's all. As soon as we hit spring and summer, because the dollar is now so weak, everything's going to skyrocket. One thing I didn't want to do, y'all, was raise my prices. I wanted to keep my prices the same. But this may force me to, because it's going to cost me more money for goods and ingredients and everything that I use to make my products. And I'm not happy about that at all, you know, but it is what it is. But these people that have been running it for hundreds of years, they are not going to be the ones to get us out of this mess, y'all. Mm-mm. Just understand that. We're going to have to be careful about what you spend your money on. If it's things you really truly don't need, um, going to restaurants and eating and all that stuff, you're going to have to cut all that stuff out because everything is about to be unaffordable up in here. That's the only thing Donald Trump will know how to do is keep everything unaffordable. And unfortunately, this means layoffs and everything going on in the country. It's going to be a surge of people losing their jobs. So y'all, you're going to have to prepare the best that you can under the circumstances. All of us are going to have to do that. All of us. All right, let me show you some videos that came out very recently. All right, please give me a 1 if you can see my screen. Okay, let me just get out of here. Thank you.
On the global perception of the US economic stability and reliability of its economic system. And so together, those factors combined produced one of the biggest episodes of dollar weakness in recent decades. Now, heading into 2026, investors are wrestling with a few big questions. First, is this the beginning of a long-term collapse in the dollar? The evidence suggests that it is due to slowing US growth, large fiscal deficits, and sticky inflation. All of these things point to continued pressure on the US currency. In other words, the foundations of the dollar dominance are eroding. Yes, it is true that at this point in time, the dollar remains the world's main reserve currency and the world's main settlement currency, but there are new alternatives now. For example, the BRICS just changed the financial architecture yet again. It is very big news for global trade and investment flows. Now, the second big question is whether the dollar's 2025 decline has finally made it attractive again. Yes, attractive again. At this point, you're probably thinking, what does that even mean? Well, despite the sharp drop in its value, the dollar is still believed to be overvalued relative to most global currencies. Out of more than 30 major developed and emerging market currencies, only a handful are more overvalued than the US dollar today. So while it's cheaper than it is far from a bargain. And guess what? It likely means that it's going to decline even further. Which brings us to the next point. The two reasons I just mentioned are why investors are increasing exposure to non-US assets. Investors are now recognizing that many overseas markets may be offering more upside, or in other words, more earning potential. And so that is, of course, driven by their currency appreciation. Even a modest shift away from US-only exposure can improve your diversification and help hedge against further dollar weakness, which is expected. So investors are increasingly attracted to non-US assets, and that's where the capital is directed.
In today's video, I'm going to explain to you why the Federal Reserve and the US government have chosen hyperinflation rather than deflation. Let's start with this. So what is the underlying problem here? Simply put, the politicians and the federal government, they have a spending problem. I can't say it any more easily than that. So the federal government spends more than they make. They've accumulated all this debt. Everybody knows that they can't pay this money back. So consequently, the US government, along with the Federal Reserve, they're working in conjunction, they have to print trillions of dollars. And of course, that is inflationary. But right now, we're at a point where the rate of deficits, the rate of borrowing, so the debt accumulation, and the rate of interest payments are accelerating hard. And along with that, the rate of inflation. And right now, if you believe that the rate of inflation it has cooled down, that the problem is solved, I'm just telling you that this is the calm before the storm. So now that you have a better understanding of the situation, let's run some scenarios.
January 2026. Right now, as you watch this, the US national debt just crossed $38.4 trillion. That's $6.12 billion added every dollar, single day. But here's what nobody's telling you. The dollar's share of global reserves just hit 56.3% in mid-2025, the lowest level in 30 years, and it's accelerating. Saudi Arabia, the nation that created the petrodollar, just told the world they're open to new ideas about selling oil and Chinese yuan. Not speculation. Official government statement. September 2024. I'm about to show you something that will change how you see your financial future forever. There's a pattern, a four-stage mechanism that has destroyed every reserve currency in human history. Spain, Britain, the original dollar system, zero exceptions. And we are currently in stage 3. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what's coming. And more importantly, what you need to do about it. Let's go. Forget everything you think you know about currency, because there's a mathematical pattern here. A sequence that has repeated itself throughout history with terrifying precision. It happens in 4 stages every single time. A nation becomes the dominant military or economic power. They control something the world desperately needs: resources, trade routes, energy. Other nations have no choice. They must use that nation's currency, not because it's better, because there is literally no alternative. This is the foundation, and it always starts with force or necessity. Here's where it gets dangerous. The dominant power realizes something seductive. They can print money and the entire world must accept it. Think about that for a second. You can create currency out of thin air and buy real goods from other nations. Cars from Germany, electronics from China, oil from the Middle East. All you have to do is print paper, so they start running massive deficits, funding wars, building empires, creating social programs. They export their inflation to everyone else. Other countries hold their currency as reserves, absorbing the debasement. It feels like unlimited power. It's actually a ticking time bomb. Eventually, the math catches up. Other nations start noticing something. They're holding currency that's being systematically devalued. They're working, producing, exporting. And in return, they're getting paper that buys less every year. The trust begins to crack. Bilateral trade deals emerge. Alternative currencies gain traction. The dominant power responds with threats, sanctions, financial warfare. But here's the thing about trust. Once it's broken, you can't restore it by force. The exodus has already begun. This is where history gets brutal. The end comes faster than anyone expects. A new power rises with stronger fundamentals, better fiscal discipline, control of critical resources, growing economic strength. Other nations abandon the old currency in a cascade, not slowly, all at once. The former dominant power faces hyperinflation or severe devaluation. The economy contracts, social unrest explodes, and a new system emerges from the ashes. 4 stages, century after century, without exception. Now watch what happens when we apply this to history. Spain is the superpower. They've just discovered the silver mines of Potosi in what's now Bolivia. And these aren't just any mines. At peak production, Potosi alone supplied 60% of the world's silver. The Spanish silver real becomes the first true global currency, used in Europe, Asia, the Americas, Africa, every major trade route. Spanish military dominance and resource monopoly made it inevitable. Stage 1 complete. The monopoly is established. But then Spain discovered something dangerous. Why produce goods when you can just mint coins the world must accept? Spanish manufacturing collapsed. They ran enormous trade deficits for 150 years straight. Between 1500 and 1650, over 150,000 tons of silver flowed out of the Americas. Most of it went straight to China and other trading partners to buy silk, spices, and manufactured goods. Spain was living the dream, importing everything, exporting currency. Stage 2 complete. The debasement has begun. By 1600, the cracks were showing. The silver coins were being debased, lower silver content, higher inflation. The Dutch noticed. The English noticed. They started building their own trade networks to avoid Spanish manipulation. They settled trades in their own currencies. Spain responded with military threats and trade restrictions. It didn't work. The trust was gone. Stage 3 complete. The exodus accelerates. Spain declared bankruptcy for the 3rd time. By 1650, the Spanish Empire was in terminal decline. The silver real became worthless. The Dutch guilder and British pound emerged as the new dominant currencies. Spain, once the most powerful empire on earth, never recovered. Stage 4 complete. Pattern confirmed. Fast forward to 1815. Britain rules the waves. The Royal Navy controls global trade routes. The The pound sterling, backed by gold, becomes the world's reserve currency. From 1815 to 1914, if you wanted to do international business, you did it in pounds. Stage 1, the monopoly. But then came World War I. The cost was staggering. In today's money, about $4.2 trillion, Britain abandoned the gold standard in 1914 to print currency and finance the war. After the war, they tried to return to gold at the pre-war rate. Disaster. The economy couldn't support it. By 1931, Britain permanently abandoned the gold standard. The pound lost 20% of its value overnight, but they kept spending. World War II cost another $3.8 trillion. The empire was living on borrowed money and borrowed time. Stage 2, the debasement. By 1945, everyone knew. Britain was broke. The United States held 60% of the world's gold reserves. The Bretton Woods Conference in 1944 made it official. The dollar would replace the pound as the global reserve currency. Britain tried to maintain influence through the sterling area. They forced colonies and trading partners to use pounds. It failed spectacularly. Between 1945 and 1967, Britain had 7 separate currency crises. Nations were dumping pounds as fast as diplomatically possible. Stage 3, the breaking point. November 18th, 1967, Britain devalued the pound by 14.3% in a single day. The sterling area collapsed within 5 years. By 1976, Britain required an IMF bailout. The pound never regained reserve status. The empire that once controlled a quarter of Earth's land surface was financially irrelevant. Stage 4, collapse complete. But here's where it gets interesting. Because the dollar didn't die in the 1970s, it evolved. And that evolution is what's dying right now. August 15th, 1971, President Nixon appears on national television. He announces the dollar will no longer be convertible to gold. Why? Because the United States had printed so many dollars that foreign nations were draining Fort Knox. Let me show you the pattern. Bretton Woods, the dollar becomes the global reserve currency. $35 per ounce of gold, fixed rate, guaranteed convertibility. Every nation would hold dollars as good as gold. US military and economic dominance made it the only viable option. Stage 1, the monopoly established, but then America got tempted. The Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Great Society programs, the space race. By 1965, massive budget deficits. They were printing dollars far beyond their gold reserves. France noticed first. In 1965, President de Gaulle began converting France's dollar reserves to gold. He sent warships to New York to collect it. Other nations followed. Stage 2, the debasement exposed. Between 1950 and 1971, US gold reserves dropped from 20,000 tons to 8,100 tons. The math was impossible to hide. Foreign nations held $80 billion in claims, and the US only had $10 billion in gold to cover them. Nixon had 2 choices: honor the convertibility and watch Fort Knox drain completely, or break the promise. He broke the promise. Stage 3, trust shattered. The Bretton Woods system collapsed instantly. The dollar fell 30% against major currencies within 2 years. Inflation exploded to 13.5% by 1980. But the dollar didn't die, because Henry Kissinger flew to Saudi Arabia in 1974 and made a deal that would change everything. Saudi Arabia would only sell oil in US dollars. In exchange, America would provide military protection and weapons. Every nation needs oil, so every nation would need dollars. The petrodollar was born, and for 50 years it worked perfectly. Until now. Let me show you what's happening right now, in real time, with verified data. As of December 3rd, 2025, the US national debt is $38.4 trillion. It increased $2.23 trillion in just 1 year. That's $6.24 billion per day. But here's what that number doesn't show you. The interest on that debt is now $981 billion per year. It has almost tripled in just 5 years. We're spending more on interest than on defense, more than on Medicare. Now watch what happens when we apply the 4-stage pattern. After the Kissinger-Saudi deal by 1980, global oil trade was 100% denominated in dollars. Every nation needed dollars to buy energy. This created permanent demand for US currency, regardless of our fiscal policy. America could run deficits forever. The world had to absorb them. Stage 1, complete.
Besides inflation going up to 2.7%, which, by the way, may be skewed due to government shutdown of employees are leaving the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That 2.7% increase inflation in mind, but I have additional news on prices going up. More businesses are now starting to pass on tariffs to consumers. Businesses pay the tariffs to the US government. The money has never left the US. Of course, businesses are going to pass off higher costs to consumers. That is literally Business 101, Economics 101. Hi, my name's Christina. I have a master's degree in business. Please get prepared to pay higher cost, anywhere from 10% to 147% on what you use and also what you consume. Many things are not made in America. They may be assembled in America. That is not made in America, which means they will have a tariff. Automobiles, computers, furniture, pretty much anything you buy right now is going to have higher price in 2026. Please, if you don't need to buy anything big, don't do it. Also, shop around, use your phone. Drop a comment and follow for more.
It took 100 years to build the British Empire. It took 7 days to destroy it. In November 1956, the British pound was the undisputed king of global money. It was as good as gold. But then the prime minister picked up the phone and heard a threat from the United States that changed history instantly. The Americans didn't threaten war. They threatened to sell. They told Britain to withdraw its troops from Egypt, or the US would dump its holdings of British pounds and bankrupt the country. By morning, Britain folded. The troops came home. And in that single week, the pound lost its crown and the US dollar took the throne it still holds today. Most people think the death of a superpower is a slow, decades-long fade. They imagine a gentle sunset, a graceful passing of the torch. They are wrong. History shows us that when the end comes, it happens violently and it happens fast. The decline may take generations, but the final collapse happens in days, sometimes hours. And if you look at the financial data coming out of the United States in early 2026, we are standing on the edge of that same cliff. The numbers are flashing red, the warning signs are everywhere, and almost nobody's paying attention. To understand 2026, we have to go back to 1914. Picture the world before the Great War. If you were a wealthy merchant in Shanghai, a banker in New York, or trader in Buenos Aires, you kept your money in London. You didn't do it because you loved the British. You didn't do it out of loyalty or admiration. You did it because the pound was the global operating system. The British pound was backed by gold, real, physical gold, sitting in the vaults of the Bank of England. It was protected by the Royal Navy, the most powerful military force the world had ever seen. British law governed international contracts. British insurance companies underwrote global shipping. British banks financed the railways of Argentina, the mines of South Africa, and the factories of India. The pound wasn't just a currency, it was the infrastructure of global commerce. It felt invincible. But this is the first lesson history teaches us. Invincibility is a lie. By the time a country feels untouchable, the rot has usually already started. The peak of confidence is often the beginning of decline. In 1914, Britain controlled roughly 25% of the world's land surface. The sun literally never set on the British Empire. But beneath the flags and the fanfare, the foundations were cracking. The country was about to make a decision that would seal its fate. Not immediately, but inevitably. Britain decided to fight World War I on credit. Let me explain what that means. When Britain entered the Great War, the government believed it would be over by Christmas, a quick, decisive victory. They were catastrophically wrong. 4 years later, Britain had lost nearly 1 million men. The country had spent the equivalent of trillions of dollars in today's money, and they had done it by borrowing. Before the war, Britain was the world's largest creditor nation. Countries owed money to Britain. By 1918, Britain owed money to everyone, especially the United States. The country had literally sold its future to win the present. But here's the thing about debts. They don't disappear. They compound. And when you've mortgaged your empire to survive one war, you're in no position to fight another. Yet that's exactly what happened. 20 years later, Britain was back at war, this time against Nazi Germany. Once again, the country fought with borrowed money. Once again, the bills came from America. By 1945, Britain had won the war, but lost its financial independence. The country was technically bankrupt, surviving entirely on loans from the United States through programs like Lend-Lease and the Marshall Plan. And here is the catch. Here is the part that should terrify every American reading this. The British public didn't feel poor. In 1950s London, there was full employment. The National Health Service was brand new, providing free health care to everyone. The government was building hospitals and schools and council housing. Rationing had ended. Shops were full. To the average citizen walking down Oxford Street, the empire was still alive and well. But financially, it was a zombie. The appearance of prosperity was masking a corpse. How does a bankrupt nation maintain the illusion of wealth? The same way.
On Monday, shortly after it, of course, was revealed on Sunday evening that Jeanine Pirro has launched this investigation into Fed Chair Jerome Powell. On Monday, exactly as predicted, the value of the dollar dropped. The value of the dollar dropped, of course, because the global markets now view the United States Federal Reserve as not being an independent entity. They view it as a wholly owned subsidiary of the Trump organization, which has the potential to wreck the entire U.S. economy. And not just do what Trump's tariffs did, where, oh God, we're feeling this pain, but if we get rid of the tariffs, then hey, pain's gone. This is a pain that could take decades to overcome. This is a pain that may never go away. Because if Donald Trump's interference with the Fed, which of course is obvious at this point, if it continues, and we actually have a good indication, a 100% confirmation that it will continue, the value of the dollar could drop to the point where it no longer becomes the global currency that it is. It would no longer be the gold standard. A different form of currency would take its place. Once that happens, the only way for that to change back is if that other currency experiences the same.
All right, y'all. It is going to happen. I knew a switch would happen. It may actually happen this year. I don't believe the dollar is going to be able to hang on to global dominance anymore. If you are devaluing it and everybody is saying right now this is the end, and I really believe that too. I think if we had good politicians in charge, that's one thing, but we don't. America got the worst of the worst running it. And Donald Trump is the last person that's going to be capable of getting America out of this mess. He can't do it. He can't do it. This dementia man can't do it. I think everybody needs to admit he does not have what it takes to turn things around in this country. That's why inflation actually got worse under Donald Trump. And y'all remember when he had that Liberation Day about a year, not long after he was putting out those global tariffs, he had what was called Liberation Day. I think I think the value lost like over $5 trillion in one day. Yeah, I mean, come on. The only thing he can do is make things worse. He is definitely not in a position to make things better at all. So I don't anticipate America turning this around. And I'm sure we'll find out which currency is going to dominate. And that's really the end for America. America heavily counted on this dollar and always believe it would be the dominant currency in the world. And as you can see, that ain't going to be the case at all. It's not going to be the case at all. And plus, you see other countries making moves, like Saudi Arabia. They're no longer just taking petrodollars. They're open to taking currency all around the world for countries to pay for their oil. And really, once that happened, that was a major milestone right there. That was major. So y'all know, and one thing thank you for bringing that up, Gabriella. Yeah, racism is very expensive. And y'all, when they try to blame us for this, we got to do a lot of pushback because you know how weak these people are. Whenever they feel backed up in the corner, then it's everybody's fault except for theirs. We know how they operate. So we're not taking no blame. They've been running the show for hundreds of years. All of this falls on them. All right. So you will not push it off on us at all, because we are in a position to push back, and we will. This is all their fault. They can't even get around that. So, y'all, normally I wouldn't be up, but when I saw the news and I noticed a lot of people are jumping on and talking about this dollar collapse, but Donald Trump taking over the Federal Reserve, that will only make things worse. This man don't know how to run shit. Mm-mm. Yeah, I remember NAFTA. Yep, Ryan. I remember that. I do. I do. It is a shame. So y'all be careful out here, and we just got to do the best that we can to keep each other informed and try to stay afloat the best that we can. If it's things that you don't have to spend your money on, like I know people love going on vacation and love, every now and then treating yourself, but you may have to cut a lot of things out in order to make it. Remember, the dollar is officially not not what it once worth, and it's not going to be worth a dollar again. It's not. I think everybody should know it's what the value will always be under a dollar. So, y'all, I'm not going to keep you any longer because it's late, and I know many of you probably have to go to work. So, I'm going to go ahead and conclude. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll just stay informed. That's what we will do. Stay informed. Shalom, family.